All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Lovely afternoon. We got some wild card stories for you guys later in the program. Okay,
a little bit.
This is one of our favorite kicks lately. How do you live to be 102 years old?
I know.
We have the answer.
Okay, lovely grandmother who explains what she believes has led to her long life. But I just want to tell you, this is the tease. She's lying to you. And I'll explain.
Well, I at least half believe her. So we'll get to that controversy later in the program.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
But we're of course going to start with political controversy. Disastrous one abroad in a second, but fairly disastrous one here at home to begin with, and that's the so-called debt ceiling deal. Is it really about the debt ceiling? And is it really a deal?
Is it?
Is it?
Well, we're going to give you the facts. You can decide for yourselves. We're going to share our point of view, of course. So let's get started.
But we also did something different. In this family, we may have a child that able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual, so he's going to have work requirements, he's going to get a job, and it's going to make the life easier.
Damn right, Republicans admitting, that of course is House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, admitting that the top goal for the Republican Party is to put those damn kids to work. How dare they sit on the couch and collect those welfare benefits? Now, of course, he was on Fox News to discuss the debt deal that he and Joe Biden have agreed upon. Now, the real question is, will Congress pass it? And if you think that Joe Biden did a good job in negotiating this deal, you would be mistaken, because Republicans got everything they wanted, and apparently it's still not good enough. They're looking to squeeze a little more in terms of austerity. So let's give you the details on what we know so far. So this deal, as it stands today, does in fact include austerity. It includes work requirements. It even has some goodies, some surprise goodies for Senator Joe Manchin and his energy-related projects. So let's get started with what I think deserves a lot more attention, but has not been getting much attention in its coverage: the pay-go provision. What is that? Well, the bill text applies Congress's pay-as-you-go rule, which requires new spending to be offset by savings elsewhere, to executive actions. That would mean presidential actions like student loan forgiveness would require a huge offset. Do you guys understand what's happening here? So the pay-go provisions, which have already impacted Congress, essentially say, if you want to push for, let's say, an executive action or a piece of legislation, you have to cut spending elsewhere to offset the new spending for this new initiative, this new policy. It is a very convenient provision for Democrats to point to as an excuse for why they do nothing for you. The legislative filibuster, what could we do? In this case, pay-go. The pay-go provisions, what could we do? It's just a convenient excuse, and of course Biden agreed to it because he wants the convenient excuse. So that's just the beginning, tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to get to. Cenk.
Yeah, so every part of the deal helps Republicans, including the Joe Manchin part. Progressives got absolutely nothing out of it, but it's not just about progressives, Democrats, other than Joe Manchin and his dirty energy deal, literally got zero, nothing. So if you're seeing in the press, oh my God, it was a wonderful compromise. There was no compromise at all. As you'll see here, every provision got worse as the negotiations went further. The headlines were so misleading. I thought maybe Biden clawed something back from the Republicans. No, he gave them even more.
Yep.
So, and look, I said from day one that Biden wasn't gonna do anything in the next 2 years. That was super obvious. It was obvious before they even lost the House, but after they lost the House, it was an absolute guarantee. But the media does the thing of like, oh no, you never know. Biden cares a lot about a lot of things. He's trying really hard on a lot of things. He wasn't trying anything on a single issue, right? And so, but as Anna's pointing out here, once you put in pay-go, it's over. Now it's technically, legally, nothing is ever going to get done in these next 2 years that would be part of the Democratic agenda. And Biden, the media will lie to you. And they say, oh, he did a wonderful bipartisan conference. No, Biden is thrilled.
Super thrilled.
Because then he doesn't have to bother pretending to do things he was never gonna do anyway. He can just go campaign for himself, the only person he cares about.
Exactly, so think about this. In Congress, because of pay-go, because of ideological divisions, nothing ever gets done unless it has to do with major handouts to corporate power, right? Like various government grants in the form of the, infrastructure bill, it all tends to benefit the corporate world. The only way that we get anything done these days is if the president, a Democratic president, passes something through executive action, and PAYGO basically nixes that. But there is one caveat that I want to make sure you know about. So for instance, the text says that the White House Office of Management and Budget could waive the requirements if necessary for the delivery of essential services or necessary for effective program delivery. So it's just the executive branch's version of the parliamentarian in the Senate. Right? In this case, it would be the Office of Management and Budget determining whether or not the executive action is worthy enough to do without the PAYGO provision taking effect. All right, let's move on. There's a lot more to get to, including what we all kind of expected to happen, which was the cap on discretionary spending. So as Time writes, negotiators agreed to cap annual discretionary spending for 2 years, keeping non-defense spending levels flat next year and raising them by 1% in 2025. Okay, that's a fancy way of trying to say they're capping spending when it comes to any government program that benefits ordinary Americans, which is it's a cut, basically, because when you take into account inflation, it ends up being a cut, but they're gonna continue raising spending for defense specifically. That means funding for most domestic programs such as housing, education, and road safety initiatives will stay the same next year at around $936 billion. And again, by staying the same, it's really a spending cut because of inflation. So let me give you some more. The work requirements are, of course, part of this deal. So for those who rely on food stamps or SNAP benefits, which amounts to about $6 a day, they will have to prove that they are working in order to get those benefits, okay? So the deal also raises the age limit until which able-bodied, low-income adults without dependents would be required to work to receive food stamps from 50 to 54 years old. The expanded restrictions would expire in 2030. So if you are a 50-year-old and you're having difficulty getting a new job because of very clear age discrimination that obviously impacts people in their 50s, too bad, between the ages of 50 to 54, you would not be qualified for food stamps, even if you're having difficulty finding a job because of these work requirements. Yep. It's unbelievable. Except with this Democratic Party, very believable.
Okay, quick note on that. All the standard corporate Democrats, including Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the Democrats in the House now, said there's no way that they were gonna cut include work requirements. And we told you, no, they will definitely do it. In fact, I made a bet with Emma Vigeland for $100. I was positive that they were gonna do work requirements. Why? Because I know Biden's legislative track history and his presidential track history. He always agrees to spending cuts from Republicans, always, 100% of the time, and always gives them more than any negotiator thought was possible when we first started the negotiations. Of course they're gonna do. So okay, Hakeem Jeffries, let alone the progressives, all said that it would not stand. Looks like it's standing. So who was right and who was wrong? And is Hakeem Jeffries fighting back now? No, zero, nothing.
In fact, just a quick reminder, I believe it was last week, Hakeem Jeffries came out with a statement, all of a sudden changing his tune and saying that the work requirements are reasonable.
Oh, reasonable, all of a sudden, huh? All of a sudden get a call from the donors. Oh, remember, this is not about the debt ceiling. This is a wealth redistribution plan to take from the people who have the least and give it to people who have the most. This doesn't even necessarily reduce the deficit. The whole thing is an utter sham. There are actual facts in the world.
Right.
Right-wing media and mainstream media take those facts and pervert them to no end. But there are things in this here. Here, I'll give you another one. So they were the IRS funding. Now that's the one thing I gave the Democrats a ton of credit for, $80 billion over 10 years, not over 1 year, okay? So that they could increase the audits for people making over $400,000 a year. Those are unfortunately, the wealthier cheat on their taxes by far the most. So for every dollar you put into the IRS, you get $6 back in revenue. So that's what the nonpartisan governmental organizations agreed to, right? So what did they do? They weren't supposed to touch it. Then all of a sudden Biden said, okay, maybe we cut it by 10 billion out of the 80 billion. Okay, so all of a sudden we are touching it. And then the latest deal I mean, the headlines say, amazing, partisan and Biden got an amazing deal. It's now, they cut it by 20 billion.
Yep.
It got twice as bad. Where's the amazing deal part of this? Guys, you can go back and see the earlier articles. They're all archived. First, they said none of this would happen. Then it was 10 billion, now it's 20 billion. There are facts in the world. Mainstream media is lying to you. This is a terrible deal.
And we've been saying from the very beginning that everything Republicans were promoting, everything Republicans were demanding would be provisions that Biden would eventually agree to, and that's exactly what happened. So for instance, when you're cutting 20 billion from the allocated 80 billion to ensure that wealthy tax dodgers are paying their fair share, what do? What does that do? That aids and abets the tax dodgers. That actually means that we're gonna lose revenue because of the tax dodgers doing what they do and dodging their taxes. Democrats were bragging about how the extra funding to the IRS to ensure the wealthy were paying their fair share and were not dodging their taxes, that would actually increase revenue by $200 billion. That's what they were saying.
Now it's gone. So now, by the way,
to some extent, yes.
And those 60 billion left, they're talking about, oh, don't worry, it just goes to bureaucracy. No, it was supposed to go to the audits, so that we stop the tax cheats and we get extra revenue in, so the deficit is not as bad. Instead, on average, I mean, finish the math on it, 20 billion times 6, according to, again, nonpartisan groups. That means they put $120 billion hole in the deficit. Wait a minute, I thought this was about deficit reduction. It ain't about deficit reduction. They cut from the poor and they give to the rich.
This is a wealth redistribution bill. Cenk mentioned that perfectly earlier today, because it redistributes wealth, I mean, what's left of wealth from the bottom to the top, right? This is a way to aid and abet the tax cheats. This is a way to continue increasing defense spending while imposing caps and austerity on any other government program that helps ordinary people. I mean, they're hyper focused on work requirements for the needy, for people who rely on food stamps for sustenance.
$2 a meal. They're cutting it when it's just $2 a meal. They're like, that's too much for the poor, but we have to give everything to the rich. Now, hold on, we're not done yet. Let me speed through the rest of it for you guys. So again, deficit reduction, my ass. No, the military budget goes up 3%. Why? Because that goes directly to defense contractors who donate to both Republicans and Democrats. This doesn't reduce the debt. It's just to give to the rich and to the donors. And so that part is not deficit reduction. That part sucks. That's exactly what the Republicans want. Now, the one part that the Democrats got, was the Mountain Valley Pipeline. That's the one that Joe Manchin wanted, right? That Anna referred to earlier. Notice progressive priorities like paid family leave that would help you when you have a baby, higher minimum wage, higher wages for all of us, wages get pushed up. None of that is ever carried over. Once it's dead, it's permanently dead.
That's right.
But this son of a bitch, Joe Manchin, has wanted this all along, and Joe Biden broke every promise to progressives, every promise. But to Manchin, oh yes, put it in that one, put it in that one, put it in this one. This is like the 8th bill that they've put it into. And they're gonna sneak it in because it helps fossil fuel companies and donors and sons of bitch conservatives like Joe Manchin. That's who Joe Biden is. The media is 100% lying to you. More cuts, $30 billion from the COVID bill. They had already passed it. The Democrats already did a victory lap. Oh, we got your money. Oh, just kidding. $30 billion back. We got to give it to the rich. We can't have it lying around for the average American. Gone. Every part of this is a disaster. Speeds up energy projects. Does that help the deficit? It has nothing to do with the deficit. Just helps oil and gas companies. Right. Oh, look at that, the donors are helped again.
Right.
Guys, the facts are obvious.
Exactly, just to shed more light on the energy projects. Basically, there used to be, currently, there are multiple government agencies that need to sign off on new energy related projects because they need to look into how it impacts the environment. I know, believe it or not, there is some oversight in regard to the environmental impact of some of these energy projects. Well, according to this new deal, it would cut out many of those government agencies that would oversee these projects and approve these projects and just rely on one government agency to give the green light. And I guarantee you, in every case, they will give the green light. It just makes it easier to get these energy projects, these fossil fuel projects through. And you're so right, Cenk, in that anytime there is an effort to pass legislation that would help ordinary people, once it fails, it fails. We never hear about it again. But when it comes to projects like Joe Manchin's, Mountain Valley Pipeline, it's never dead. They'll find a way, they'll find any opportunity to sneak these provisions in and get what they want. Because as long as it benefits the wealthy, as long as it benefits corporations, as long as it benefits, honestly, members of Congress who stand to profit off of it themselves, they'll get it through. They'll get it through. That's exactly what happens every single time. It's just, I don't understand what Democrats plan on campaigning on. Like, what are they? No, but seriously, like, let's have a real conversation about this, okay? Because when it comes to corporate giveaways, when it comes to aiding and abetting corporate greed, Democrats are right there with Republicans at this point. They're pro-corporate, they're pro-austerity, they're pro-screwing ordinary Americans and redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top. There's no difference at this point when it comes to the pro-corporate policies. So what are they gonna campaign on? The rhetorical stuff they engage in when it comes to cultural issues? And I say rhetorical because take a step back and really think about what they've done for the various disenfranchised communities that they purport to care about. Seriously, ask yourselves, what have Democrats done to improve these people's lives? Nothing. It's just rhetorical garbage. So I don't know, am I supposed to hang my hat on the Democratic Party because of their rhetoric?
No, you know what they're gonna run on, everybody knows it. We're not Trump.
Trump is so scary.
But we're not Trump.
But okay. Biden has implemented many of the policies or extended many of the policies from the Trump administration.
Corporate tax rates extended.
The immigration policies.
Tax cuts for the rich extended. Immigration policies extended. We can go on and on and on and on. But look, they're gonna go to their two favorite plays. One is we're not as bad as the Republicans.
Except they kind of are.
No, because Trump tried to end democracy. So okay. That's how low the bar is for Democrats now.
So
we
pathetic.
didn't also try to end democracy, vote for us. And then they go to their second trick, which is the most effective trick by far and has worked every time until, and we don't know, it might work again, which is they just get the mainstream media to lie 24/7 on their behalf. Biden's a progressive hero, Biden is FDR 2.0, Biden has accomplished more things than any other president in human history. I mean, these insane, ludicrous lies. And but they get people to believe it because their propaganda is much more sophisticated. I gotta tell you, last two tricks here. One is on student debt. They're like, in fact, the article I read from Time magazine says, Biden refused to retreat on his plan to cancel up to $20,000 of student debt. Refused to retreat, it makes him sound strong. So did he get anything? No, he actually gave more to the Republicans. He says, you know how we were not collecting interest on all the loans because of COVID, et cetera, on the student debt? Okay, Republicans, you win, I'm gonna give you that. We're gonna start collecting the interest again at the end of the summer, okay? Well, how about the refusal to retreat on the 20,000? No, that's irrelevant. The Supreme Court's deciding that, and they're gonna decide it pretty soon. And very likely they're gonna rule against Biden, and Biden knows that. So he now retreats on student debt and gives Republicans more, takes away from students. So later when the Supreme Court rules against him, he's gonna go, oh golly gee, I tried. Mainstream media, tell everybody how epic I am, okay? But God, there was nothing I could do. Oh, did I give away the interest rate forgiveness too? I guess I did, didn't I? Tell them how good a compromise it was. Well, what did Democrats get? Zero, 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 zero. Guys, there are facts in the world. Mainstream media, they actually write it in their articles. Like you go line by line, you cannot find one thing the Democrats got. But the headline says, amazing compromise.
Bipartisanship.
Bipartisanship, okay, last thing, last trick. So they go, I see it all over social media now, establishment Democrat like fanboys. Like, oh, well, Cenk, how could you say this was a bad deal? The Republicans are complaining about it. Yeah, no crap, Sherlock, to put it somewhat politely. Guys, this is part of the game. I've covered this for 25 years straight. Republicans demand something outrageous. The Democrats can just ignore it, like use the 14th Amendment. There's 1,000 ways to ignore it, right? Democrats choose to enter a negotiation they don't have to enter into. Then they give away more and more and more and more. And at the end, the Republicans go, not enough. Oh, this is outrageous. And they ask for one more egregious thing. And guess what the Democrats do? And now I will predict it ahead of time, as we always do, and we are almost always right. If the mainstream media is wrong, right, and we're wrong, and we're the radicals, how come we're right on the facts every single time? So I will tell you right now, the Republicans in the House will vote this down. There'll be a panic, and they'll say, "Oh my God, we got to do something now!" And Biden will give them more,
1,000%.
because that's what he always does here. In fact, I'll do a fun prediction for what he'll give them. This one's like, because he can give them 1,000 different things, so this one's not guaranteed. But my guess is he'll move the IRS defunding he moved it from 0 to 10 billion to 20 billion. Now I think he'll probably move it to 40 billion and give away half of the IRS funding, because they don't want to audit the rich. The one thing I gave them credit on was, it turns out, a sophisticated trick where they were just gonna pull the football later.
Yeah, and look, the GOP's tactics are enviable. They're never satisfied. They always demand more, and Democrats, because of the fact that they're bribed by the same people, are always willing to give more. And so that's exactly how this is gonna play out. I have no doubt about it. And I'm just curious, all of the people celebrating Biden right now on Twitter or social media, have they bothered to read anything?
No.
Have they sat down? Have they had the discipline to just sit down and actually read the details of the deal?
If they have, show me one thing Democrats got out of it.
No,
That's
seriously,
a challenge.
that's such a great question. Seriously, maybe we're missing it. What did Biden and the Democrats get out of this deal?
There are facts in the world. They got nothing. Mainstream media wants to present alternative facts to you, just like Fox News does.
You know what? I apologize. There is one thing Biden got. He made a deal with the devil, specifically because he wants to focus on campaigning for re-election. So he, because of this deal, if it gets through, will not have to worry about raising the debt ceiling next year as he's campaigning.
Yeah, but that's still nothing. Because he doesn't have to worry about it by just using the 14th Amendment. And we were done with this conversation months ago.
No, you're not getting it. I know it's nothing, but it's something that Biden wants for his own purposes, for his own political aspirations, for his own narcissism.
No, you're absolutely right. And if we're framing it that way, then Biden also got a lot of things he wanted. He wanted to cut from the poor and the middle class, and he wanted to give it to the rich. That's what he's done his entire career. He also got that. He wanted an excuse to do nothing the next 2 years. He got that. He got an excuse to do nonstop campaigning. So Biden got a lot of wins. The Republicans got a lot of wins, but the American people got screwed. And who told you that? Certainly not the mainstream media. They told you Joe Scarborough was beside himself, ecstatic for how much he loves this deal.
And we're gonna talk about that when we come back from the break. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Obrador.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Raiku, Sensei, Scotty, Furnace, and Guy on board. They all just became TYT by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. Aimster and Vicky Gray also gifted 5 Young Turks memberships because they're American heroes and we love them for it. Casper.
All right. Preliminary reporting on the deal that President Joe Biden made with Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on the debt ceiling indicate that Democrats are giving everything away and Republicans will get everything they want, including spending caps on government programs that help ordinary Americans, a continued increase in defense spending, and of course, a special project for Joe Manchin that has to do with a natural gas pipeline that would run through his state. Now, while objective people can look at the deal and look at the provisions and clearly understand that Republicans are getting everything they want, that's not what you're gonna hear from corporate media, including Joe Scarborough over at MSNBC. Here's what he had to say about it.
You actually have in Joe Biden and here Kevin McCarthy, but you have a Democratic president and Republican Senate and now House that have worked together in pretty historic ways over the past year and a half, getting bipartisan legislation. And let's look at Kevin McCarthy really quickly here. This is Kevin McCarthy, who many said for quite some time, for good reason, were concerned that he was going to go sideways on supporting freedom fighters in Ukraine. We heard him shut down that Russian reporter, said get out of their country, stop killing their children, stop committing war crimes. And here, you know, the nation's economy was on the line. And, you know, he behaved responsibly. Biden behaved responsibly. They were grown-ups.
Now, to be fair to Joe Scarborough, who is a Republican and was a Republican when he was in elected office, he loves austerity and he loves spending cuts that impact ordinary Americans. He loves the idea of work requirements for people who are so needy that they need to rely on SNAP benefits, a whopping $6 a day in order to be able to feed themselves. So of course he looks at this deal and says, like, thank God the world economy and my precious stock portfolio isn't about to crash because they failed to reach a deal on the debt ceiling. But this obsession with bipartisanship is such a sham because it's never really about genuine compromise and bipartisanship. It's really about Democrats being good boys and girls and handing over all the cookies to their Republican counterparts.
Okay, guys, the mainstream media your whole life, and every one of you will agree to this because it's obvious and it's not controversial, has told you that bipartisanship is a great thing. They celebrate bipartisanship every time it happens. You see it in the headlines. Amazing bipartisan deal. They never say like terrible bipartisan deal, unfortunate bipartisan deal. I've never seen it in my whole life, neither have any of you, right? But wait, why is bipartisan by definition a good thing? What if one side wanted to cut taxes by only for the rich by $1 trillion, and the other side wanted to cut it by $2 trillion? And they reached a bipartisan agreement to cut it, take it from the middle class and give $1.5 trillion to the rich. Bipartisan compromise. But wait, why is that a good thing? Nobody agreed to that. In fact, 76% of Americans want tax increases for the rich. So why is bipartisan by definition good? It isn't. In fact, what if both sides are wrong? Then you're picking and I talk about this in my book, Justice is Coming. And guys, these things are so obvious, yet you've never heard it your whole life in the media. What if both sides are wrong? So now we're picking a neutral midpoint between two wrong sides and then celebrating it. No, the question is, objectively, what is good and what isn't? Well, how can you tell what's good? Well, one thing you can do is you can look at the polling. Don't trust me, don't trust pundits, don't trust any of those guys. Just say, hey, what do the American people want? For example, 84% of Americans want paid family leave. Hey, is it in there? I mean, that's a big, 84% in a democracy. It's obviously in there, right? Oh, no, it's not. No, you never get what you want. Are the things that are in those provisions popular? No, none of them are popular. They don't want the anti-climate change stuff that's in there. They don't want the American people don't want the cuts. We can show you the polls on each one of them. They're doing a deeply unpopular bill, but the media turns it around and goes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
It's wonderful because it's bipartisan.
It's the power of propaganda.
Bingo.
And so if you have a one-sided pro-corporate media diet, you're going to have the impression that this was an excellent negotiation. Joe Biden's a real deal maker here, right? I mean, he's so incredible with how he was willing to work and compromise with Republicans, but understand that Republicans did not compromise with Democrats at all. Like, again, everything that the GOP wanted, they got in the first round of negotiations. And now you have the, more extreme elements of the Republican Party engaging in the theater, complaining about how they allegedly didn't get everything they want, because after the first round of, whatever happens in Congress happens this week, right, where they vote on it, if it doesn't get passed, well, then Democrats will turn around and give Republicans more cookies.
Guaranteed. There's a 0% chance that this is the last deal. Biden will give them more. You can write it down in stone, okay? I've seen this movie 200 times. By the way, so is every reporter that lies in their coverage and goes, oh, wow, they have a deal, it's done. Oh, the Republicans are complaining about it. I guess it must be so good for Democrats. You goddamn liars.
In fact, why don't we go to the next video? This is from the same segment that Joe Scarborough was commenting in. And in this portion of the segment, they talk about the disdain that the GOP has in regard to this deal. Let's watch.
It does look like, I say this a little bit hesitantly because we don't know where it's headed, in the next 24 hours or 36 hours that they will get to 218 to get this thing passed.
Yeah, the House starts bringing it up today. Vote tentatively slated for tomorrow. We're not quite sure when the Senate will take it up, probably the day or two after that. Whip operations in both parties feel pretty confident that they'll get there. To your point, yes, there are extremists on the right who have made it very clear they want nothing to do with this, and they're throwing bombs left and right on Twitter. Press conferences saying this is a disaster of a deal. It's a Democratic blank check was among the rhetoric used. I believe also turd sandwich was tossed about. And we've got some progressives on the left who are also expressing some concerns, saying that they don't like this bill either. But the White House sort of expected that would be the case.
And look, before you comment on that, Cenk, I have to go to Pramila Jayapal, who's the head of the Progressive Caucus in the House. Her tepid response tells you everything you need to know about the lopsided power imbalance that we have in Congress right now when it comes to these issues. Let's watch.
This is saying to poor people and people who are in need that we don't trust them. And the average amount of assistance for SNAP, for example, is $6 a day, Jake. I mean, we're talking about $6 a day. And I think it is really unfortunate that the president opened the door to this. And while at the end of the day, perhaps this will, because of the exemptions, perhaps it will be okay. I can't commit to that. I really don't know.
Did you get it? Did you hear that last part?
Yeah.
Did you hear that last part?
I did. Yeah. All right. So she says like this is unacceptable. Okay, great. Then no problem. Don't accept it.
Right.
Why don't you just vote against it?
Right.
You're not gonna do that, are you, Jayapal? Because God forbid you should ever use your power. The progressives in Congress have given away all their power because they refuse to ever vote no. Whatever Biden says, they do. They all kneel. They all bow immediately. You just said it was unacceptable. So why are you accepting it? And you've been saying it's unacceptable the whole time. Every provision you said was unacceptable. But at the end, what are you gonna do, Pramila Jayapal? You're gonna accept it. And guys, look, the only way that they avoid the Republicans getting even more out of the deal, which Biden wants them to do, right? He wants there to be more drama, more et cetera, is that they're gonna get a couple of Republicans that are with McCarthy and a whole bunch of Democrats to vote together, right? So they're gonna need the progressives, and if they don't need the progressives, then the progressives will do a show of like huffing and puffing and vote no, full well knowing they don't need the votes, okay?
Right, so
that's how this theater is played.
Real quick, so look, let's be fair. You're asking, well, what do you plan on doing, Pramila Jayapal? Well, this is all we know so far, and I don't think it's gonna extend any further than this. Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal says the Congressional Progressive Caucus is taking a formal whip count.
Ooh.
They're doing a formal whip count, everyone,
okay,
to determine whether or not the CPC will take an official position on the debt ceiling bill. You're
wondering if you should take a progressive position on them cutting $30 billion from the COVID funding relief, $20 billion from the IRS budget, giving Manchin the dirty pipeline deal, extending the energy deals, drilling all over the country and expediting it.
Right.
We get absolutely nothing. They cut spending, they pay go on executive action. We get literally nothing out of it. The Republicans get everything they wanted and then some out of it. And you're considering whether you're gonna say progressives are theoretically against it. Wow, I didn't know you were gonna be that tough, man.
Ooh.
Hats off, hats off. Okay, and Joe Scarborough likes the deal. You know why? Because Joe Scarborough is a Republican.
Yep.
He's a former Republican congressman, but he never said he left the Republican Party. He just doesn't like Trump. By the way, he used to be great friends with Trump, including when the first time Trump was running for office. Joe Scarborough hasn't changed his positions.
Right.
He's a Republican, but MSNBC has gone so right wing that Republican looks at home at MSNBC. In Washington, a Republican is the idea of a liberal. Okay.
I mean, the Democratic Party has now become the party of disaffected Republicans, right?
100%.
Republicans who hate Trump, who are horrified at what the Republican Party has turned into. But understand that these are individuals who were Republicans under the George W. Bush administration. I became passionate about politics because I became politicized during Bush's administration. And let me just tell you something, I absolutely hated Bush's administration and the Republicans that were within that administration. So to turn around and now say, I'm gonna continue to support the Democratic Party as they have welcomed Bush-era Republicans into the party with open arms and are much more receptive to them as opposed to their own voters, as opposed to progressive policies. I mean, it's not a party that speaks to me at all at this point, at all.
Yeah, the only thing they have going for them and the only thing they ever say is Republicans are worse. They hate LGBTQ people, they're passing terrible discriminatory laws.
I know, but what have Democrats done in response to that?
I know. They've done nothing in response to that or in response to anything, right? But people in Washington, aided and abetted by mainstream media, genuinely believe that Democrats doing absolutely nothing for their voters and constantly bragging about how they only gave the Republicans half of what they want every single time is some sort of like heroic action. It isn't. It's less than the bare minimum. So as they lie to you, and by the way, our members are writing in right now saying, oh yeah, I saw it on MSNBC. They're saying this is the greatest deal ever. This is an amazing compromise. This is wonderful, right? It's so reasonable. Just ask those lying anchors, what did the Democrats get? And saying, well, they stopped the Republicans from complaining about the debt ceiling is not a thing. You could just use the 14th Amendment and be done with it. There's nothing they could do is just a grotesque lie after lie after lie as they give away the store to Republicans and the mainstream media cheers on and pretends that the Democrats are heroes. Yes, the Republicans are terrible. No, that does not mean the Democrats are angels and wonderful and actually fight back and win anything. All they ever do is give more and more to the Republicans. They have the same exact donors, which coincidentally also happen to be the advertisers for corporate media. Funny, they all get paid by the same people who just got yet another win in this deal, and they took it off of our hide, the average Americans, they redistributed that wealth, and all the people they fund just told you the wonderful little bedtime story about how it was a great bipartisan deal. And you should be really happy that they took your money and gave it to the rich again.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to do a little international news, although it does have some influence from domestic policy or people in America. So we'll talk about what's happening in Uganda and how Ted Cruz, of all people, defending members of the LGBTQ community has led to a lot of backlash toward him. That and more coming up. Don't miss it.
Obrador.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Metal Turtle 571 gifted 5 subs on Twitch. Deeply appreciated. Really, you're the best. And John W just became a member on YouTube member section. We appreciate that too. I'm just gonna read one comment from YouTube members. Not that Donald wrote in. Lifelong Dem here, and I say to Anna, amen, sister. So look, anybody who watches this show just looks up our facts and go, oh my God, they're totally right. Oh my God, they predict things ahead of time because it's so easy and obvious. Oh my God, everyone else in media is lying. That's exactly right. Okay, and you could verify it every time. We want you to verify it every time because we actually have facts. All right, let's do more news.
Well, let's do some international news. Let's take a trip to Uganda.
Same-sex relations were already illegal in Uganda, but the new law goes much further, including death sentences for, quote, aggravated homosexuality and 20 years in jail for promoting homosexuality.
This is policy that has been pushed in Uganda for over a decade at this point, and the president of Uganda has signed a new anti-LGBT law that imposes life sentences in prison and even the death penalty for members of the LGBTQ community. So it's known as the Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023, and it punishes with death. Okay, with death, those found guilty of aggravated homosexuality, a category broadly defined by legislators to include offenses that range from having gay sex with a minor to seducing someone through misrepresentation or undue influence. So in other words, the provisions in this anti-LGBT law are pretty broad and can be interpreted in such a way that people could be sentenced to death just by being who they are. Now, the law also imposes life imprisonment for anyone found to have performed a sexual act with a person of the same gender, and up to 7 years in prison for an attempt to commit the offense of homosexuality. So I wanna just be very clear about something. Much like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, what they'll do is they'll point to something that sounds reasonable to justify the law. Now, to be clear, I'm against the death penalty in all cases. I don't think state-sponsored murder makes sense when you're trying to send a message against murder in the United States, right? In this case, they would implement the death penalty for someone who is gay and engages in a sexual act with a minor. So they'll point to that and say, doesn't that sound reasonable? I mean, they're raping minors. But no. Understand that that is one tiny portion of this. And what it's really about is outlawing gay people in Uganda.
Okay, 2 things about that. Number one, the right wing in America is already saying what Anna said.
That's right. Yep.
And we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. They're all like, whoa, what's the big deal? They're just killing child rapists. No, first of all, they're not killing child rapists if it's a man who rapes a little girl. That's not in the bill.
That's not in the bill, right?
Okay, only if it's same sex is there a death penalty. If you rape a little girl and you're a man, no problem. Maybe there's a different law, but it's not an execution law and it's not this law. So be clear about what they're saying. Second of all, you're also getting the death penalty if you have sex with just normal gay sex in any way because of a misrepresentation. That's a death penalty because of a How many people have done a misrepresentation when they're hooking up? Well, I took the picture this way instead of this way. It makes me look skinnier. Misrepresentation, death penalty. Undue influence, what the hell does that mean?
I mean, it's overly broad, and it's overly broad on purpose, much like the law in Florida. Now, the law in Florida is not as extreme. It doesn't implement the death penalty toward individuals who just happen to be gay. But in this case, the punishment is far more extreme, and the law is written in a broad way, I believe, on purpose. Now, it's important to understand the forces behind the legislation because it's bad enough if we're talking about a conservative party in another country that has been pushing for this legislation, but understand that there has been a lot of influence by fundamentalists in the United States. They have been pushing for this law in Uganda for a long time, and the people behind it, the American evangelical group behind it, is known as the Fellowship. We've talked about them before. It's the same group of fundamentalists who are behind the National Prayer Breakfast. Keep that in mind, okay? Because the National Prayer Breakfast, which happens every year, also seems to attract some Democrats. Democrats participate in this, including President Joe Biden. In fact, in 2023, this year, he gave a speech at the National Prayer Breakfast, even after all the reporting came out in regard to the Fellowship and what they've been pushing for in countries like Uganda. But nonetheless, we're gonna give you Biden's protests in regard to this law in just a moment. Here's some more details on the Fellowship Project though. The Fellowship Foundation, which is a secretive US religious group whose Ugandan associate, David Bahati, wrote Uganda's infamous Kill the Gays bill, is the biggest spender in Africa. Between 2008 and 2018, in just 10 years, the group spent more than $20 million in Uganda alone to push for legislation like this disgusting anti-LGBT bill. With that said, Joe Biden reacted to what Uganda just passed, what the president just signed, this anti-LGBT bill, and here's what he says. This shameful act is the latest development in an alarming trend of human rights abuses and corruption in Uganda. I have directed my National Security Council to evaluate the implications of this bill on all aspects of US engagement with Uganda. So some reporters have taken that to mean that he might consider sanctions against Uganda because that's gonna help the situation. I don't think he's even really considering that, to be clear. There's no real indication that he's considering that. But I don't know, maybe take a step back and consider who you're rubbing shoulders with, Joe Biden, because the same people that invited you to the National Prayer Breakfast, the same event that you spoke at this year, those are the same people who have been pushing this bill in Uganda for over a decade. They got what they wanted. Why are you associating yourself with them?
100%. Look, I gotta be honest, we did great reporting on this. The TYT investigative reporting team was all over the National Prayer Breakfast. In fact, we did such good reporting, it embarrassed a lot of Democrats from pulling out all the way to Nancy Pelosi, which is amazing, right? But one remains, the stalwart, the most conservative Democrat, Joe Biden. Nope. He's gonna go to that National Prayer Breakfast, even though they're the ones that pushed this bill to execute gay people in Uganda. He's gonna go and go and go and go. So he can say to the Republicans, I'm just as conservative Christian as you guys are.
But
and then he'll pretend that he cares about the LGBTQ community in Uganda. Well, you wouldn't go to this monstrous event if you cared at all. So look, guys, we'll put links down below, tyt.com/reports. You see all of our stories on it. Amazing reporting. And we did a petition as well. That petition is still live right now. Go sign it, tyt.com/petitions for Democrats to boycott the National Prayer Breakfast. The reason why it's important is then that group, the fellowship, takes it to other countries like Uganda.
Yes.
And brags that everyone in America agrees, because here's Democratic President Joe Biden.
Exactly.
And he agrees too. And it gives a misleading impression in Uganda that the whole country, that America is totally in favor of this bill.
Okay, so look, I'm gonna use these examples to reiterate a point that I've been making on the show, and sometimes I make it broadly without giving specifics in regard to what I mean. When I say that Democrats only seem to, like, the one saving grace for Democrats is this point, where you have a system in which both parties are corrupted with corporate money. The only saving grace has been, well, they're better on cultural issues, right? They're better on cultural issues, but are they? Okay, maybe rhetorically they're better on cultural issues, but when push comes to shove, when you look at their actions, I mean, I think their actions speak for themselves. When they had a supermajority and had the ability to codify reproductive rights, they failed to do so. They didn't think it was that important, okay? After the Supreme Court reverses Roe v. Wade, you have corporate Democrats rally in support for Henry Cuellar in Texas, okay, an anti-reproductive rights Democrat. They would rather get him reelected than ensure that his progressive challenger gets elected instead. The progressive challenger who actually values reproductive rights. That's what the mainstream Democratic Party did after the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Okay, fine.
Okay, but on this issue, real quick, to your point, Anna, the Republicans have now proposed hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills across the country, so they're awful. Did the Democrats manage to fight them in the red states and win? No.
Why would they?
All of them passed, right? And then what did the Democrats always do? They almost sing now. They've got a Broadway special. There was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do. No matter what the Republicans propose, they always win. And the Democrats and the media sing together now, everybody on stage. There was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could do. And now in Uganda, they're gonna kill gay people. They're gonna put them in prison for 7 years for maybe hitting on someone. You go to prison for life if you actually have gay sex. Prison for life. And what is Joe Biden doing? Oh, I'm gonna go help the fellowship do it, but then later I'm gonna put out a statement that I am kind of against it, and I might do something about it later, like go to the National Prayer Breakfast again.
I am sick of statements from Democrats. I don't care about their rhetoric, okay? Their rhetoric being better than the rhetoric that we hear from Republicans means nothing if they don't put action behind the rhetoric that they engage in. And they don't put action behind it. They always find convenient excuses, and I'm not really interested in their excuses. Even with Democrats having a majority in Congress, having control of the levers of power, they somehow miraculously find excuses for why they can't get anything done. It's just incredibly frustrating. And I want Democrats to explain to me what they plan to run on, what they plan to campaign on. I get it, they're gonna campaign on, ooh, Trump is very dangerous. Okay, but think about your voting base. Think about voters in general. Have their lives improved since that exchange of power occurred, since Biden came into power? have their lives improved.
No, Anna, but there was nothing they could do.
Okay, well,
there was nothing they could do. Elect Democrats and Republicans will only get half of what they want. Wow, what a compelling message. Guys, we're constructive every time. I'll tell you super quick what Biden could have done. It was a simple thing, tiny thing, wouldn't have cost them anything. Hey, National Prayer Breakfast, I am definitely not coming next year unless you go call off your dogs in Uganda. You keep sending the fellowship guys to Uganda and telling them that you want them to pass that bill. You do it one more time and I'm gonna burn that National Prayer Breakfast to the ground and I'm gonna make sure no Democrat ever goes to it. Believe me, tuck their tail between their legs and they come scurrying, and maybe we save some lives in Uganda. Did Biden do that? Nope. There's always something they could do. They're lying when they say there's nothing they could do.
Well, let's get to the Ted Cruz angle to this story because this was unexpected and pretty fascinating. In response to Uganda now passing one of the most horrendous anti-LGBTQ bills, which would impose the death penalty for some members of that community, Ted Cruz, of all people, a Republican, a conservative Republican at that, has come out to condemn the new law. This is what he wrote via Twitter. The Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality is grotesque and an abomination. All civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse. #LGBTQ. I don't know what happened to Ted Cruz. This is not a tweet I would expect from him. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, actions matter. So credit where credit is due, no problem. I don't care why he did it as long as he's doing the right thing. But if you want to know why he did it, there's two reasons why. One, Republicans have gay donors. And those donors get upset about stuff like this. And so that's why some of the politicians are more reasonable than their base, as you're about to see on issues like this. The second reason is he's got polling saying that he's in a lot of trouble in Texas. So that's why he did a piece with NBC News a month ago saying about, oh no, I'm a real moderate. Ted Cruz bragging about being a moderate?
That's amazing.
A moderate.
He got elected as a Tea Party conservative, meaning further right than the mainstream Republican Party at the time.
And his big calling card now is no one licks Donald Trump's boots better than he does. Okay, his tongue is coarse with how much he's licked those boots.
Absolutely.
But all of a sudden, you get some bad polling in Texas and you want to protect the LGBTQ community. Funny how that turns out, but I'll take it. But apparently his base won't.
Well, okay, so there's his base, which he got plenty of backlash on Twitter from ordinary people after he made this statement. But let's focus on people who aren't so ordinary, including Jenna Ellis, who was Trump's lawyer, the same person who tried to help him overturn the election, this lunatic. Okay, well, what did she have to say about it? Quote, you can condemn a law that imposes the death penalty for homosexuality without being pro-LGBTQ. Like Bud Light, you should have just said nothing, not this.
So protecting gay people's lives, like even saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill them, maybe we shouldn't murder them. A bridge too far, a bridge too far. How dare you speak out verbally and say they shouldn't be murdered?
Now, she must have gotten a little bit of backlash after she made that statement, and she responded to the backlash by saying, for the commenters, I stand with Uganda on this because the definition of aggravated homosexuality subject to the death penalty is raping children. By the way, that's not true, and Ted Cruz is about to debunk her, but hold on. She also continues to say, why would Cruz be against this anyway? And what does this have to do with LGBTQ? Absolutely stupid comment. Well, he responds to her, quote tweets her, and says, Jenna, not sure why you're defending this barbaric Ugandan law. It imposes life imprisonment for consenting adults who engage in gay sex. That's ridiculous. You or I may or may not agree with their choices, but consenting adults should not go to jail for what they do in their own bedrooms, which, I mean, obviously I agree with that wholeheartedly. Your explanation for what's likely motivating that comment from Ted Cruz makes a lot of sense. But nonetheless, I'm glad he's making that point.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jenna Ellis is not alone. Almost every tweet I read in social media from right-wingers, whether it was attacking Ted Cruz, and there were tons of them attacking Ted Cruz, or anywhere else in social media was like, what's the big deal, man? One, they go with the same lie, oh, it's just for a death penalty for raping children. No, straight people who rape children don't get the death penalty in Uganda. And the law is way broader than that on the execution side, let alone what Ted Cruz is saying. Even if you put aside the execution side, you get life imprisonment for just having making a lifestyle choice on who you would like to go to bed with.
Right, so let me be clear on what the death penalty provision of the law says. The Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023 punishes with death those found guilty of aggravated homosexuality, a category broadly defined by legislators to include offenses that range from having sex with a minor to seducing someone through misrepresentation or undue influence. It is purposely broad. It is purposely broad to be able to implement this law toward members of the gay community and potentially sentence them to the death penalty.
So if all they were doing was misquoting the law, that would be very normal for right-wingers because their leaders like Jenna Ellis will lie to them and pretend that's what this law is about, right? But they don't stop there. Then I saw tons and tons and tons and tons of comments saying, what's the big deal, man? Why don't you leave Uganda alone? You should be focusing on America. Uganda, let them run their own business.
Oh yeah, by the way, okay, I agree. Then the American evangelicals who spent tens of millions of dollars and lobbied for this bill in Uganda shouldn't have done that, right? This is a law that was heavily influenced by fundamentalists here in the United States.
Yeah, and they say, look, at least Uganda is doing something about morality issues. We should be doing that here. Okay, so tell me you're not against LGBTQ people. Come on, get out. Why are you bothering to lie about it? Why are you bothering to lie about it? All right, we all know who you are. So right-wingers, don't ever, ever, ever say that look, but if you're like Ted Cruz, I mean, this is the lowest bar ever. Hey, I don't want to execute gay people, but I'll take it. But if you're in the camp that says these outrageous things, you don't get to say that you're fair or that you believe in equal rights. You don't. You're a monster and you hate these people. All right, let me ask you one last thing. Let's bring up the Tesla pictures. I saw this over the weekend at the mall. This is a place where they're selling Teslas. And they have the Pride flag. They have the Pride as a thing on Tesla, etc. I said, that's wonderful, that's great, no problem. I was there with my kids saw it. Kids get into this car. Kids see this car.
Were they scandalized?
They were not scandalized. But if you're a right-winger, wait, why aren't you scandalized? I thought it was about protecting the children. They can't ever see a message like that. Didn't you guys just attack Target? Because the children would see a message about pride.
Are you saying Tesla should be next?
I'm not, look, I don't believe in this insanity, but apparently you guys do. Why isn't Elon Musk canceled? Elon Musk spreading the message to children, you got to my children. My poor children at the mall had to see that maybe everyone should have equal rights. That maybe we should be fair to everyone and decent to everyone. And I know right-wingers, you despise that idea. Why aren't you canceling Elon Musk? Oh, that's right, because you guys are hypocrites and you don't mean anything you say.
This is just endless hellscape that we're living in. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including, what are we gonna talk about next, Cenk? Costco. I love Costco. You should love Costco too, and I'll explain why when we come back.
We're gonna explain why. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.